So, the Ninja Turtles have seen many iterations over the years. Some of them beloved, some of them divisive, and some of them... But one of the universally agreed opinions in the Tmnt community is that the live-action movie from 1990 was pretty damn good. It has its flaws, sure, and the decision to reimagine Donatello as more of a wisecracking smartass feels a little bit disingenuous, but otherwise it's pretty faithful to the source material. Today, I wanted to focus on my favorite turtle, and how he was portrayed in the movie. Raphael. If you were like me and had only been exposed to the 80s cartoon, this version of Raph was a little jarring at the time. Many kids were familiar with Rob Paulsen's take. Witty, sarcastic, and cool in the face of pressure. That was the interpretation that I first fell in love with. Partly because he wore red, and I liked basically anything that was red. Stop judging me, I was a child. But for the movie, they took the character back to his comic book roots. He was hot-headed, impulsive, and moody. He's basically the antithesis to the more virtuous Leonardo. Pretty much every adaptation since has shown Raphael this way, but in my opinion, the first Ninja Turtles movie did the best job of it. And it left enough of an impression on me that I chose to make this video about it, 30 years after the fact. I really hit the trending things, don't I? Raphael is the wild card among the Turtles, and his temper creates a real rift as he constantly bumps heads with Leo, leaving Donatello and Michelangelo on the sidelines.
Park rind?
Park rind.
One of the reasons that I love this version of the character so much is because everything he says and does feels genuine in a way, and that is due in no small part to his actor, Josh Pais. It's simple to make a one-to-one connection. He's the angry one, so he does angry things, but there's a lot more to him than that. One thing that's important to consider is that the Turtles are teenagers, like it says in the title. For the most part, this just means that they're young and hip and radical and 80s adjectives. But above all else, they're vulnerable. Being a teenager is hard. You're transitioning into adulthood and trying to form your own identity. The Turtles' whole lives up to this point had been predominantly focused on becoming ninja warriors, something that they likely accepted without question. But at this age, it's not as simple as accepting everything that Master Splinter says. The Turtles watch TV, they listen to the word on the street, they're hearing opinions other than what's been indoctrinated in them, and it can create a lot of conflicting emotions. Look no further than the opening scene where they save April from the foot. Raphael loses his sigh, and he's beside himself with anger. He's sighing angrily. That wasn't in the script, and there's a reason. Anyway, Splinter tells him that it's gone, and to let it go, but Raphael tries to argue the fact. He's mad because he messed up, and this mission meant a lot to him. They were supposed to go in and strike without a trace, and he leaves a crucial piece of evidence right there on the battlefield. The sigh itself isn't so important, but what it represents. Raphael falling short as a ninja. Something he'll do a lot in this movie, funnily enough. So he heads out to watch a movie by himself, and real quickly, have you ever wondered where the Turtles get their money from? They don't have jobs, and in this version, Splinter was the pet rat, not Hamato Yoshi himself. So yeah, where's the funding coming from? Anyway, he runs afoul of a petty crime. Raphael quickly disposes of the thugs with a high degree of restraint by his standards, only for them to be assaulted by Casey Jones. I love you, Elias Koteas. Raph and Casey get into a scrap, with Casey coming out as the victor. He calls Raphael a freak and takes off into the night, and this really gets our guy riled up. So far, we've seen this character show great skill, but he keeps making mistakes along the way, whether it's, leaving his weapon out there, or being too cocky in the fight against Casey Jones. Leads to some great dialogue, though.
A Jose Canseco bat? Tell me, you didn't pay money for this.
Ooh.
Other than taking out some lowly thugs, we haven't seen a clean victory for Raphael, and his flaws are really showing only 15 minutes into the movie. One thing I want to emphasize here is just how much Raphael detests being called a freak. It's probably something he's had on his mind a lot lately, that he can't live a normal life among other people. He tries to be as involved in the New Yorker style as he can, watching TV, going out to see a movie, probably getting stabbed. It was the early 90s. But otherwise, he's isolated. He's lonely. He's been spending his whole life confined with only his brothers and his father's company. It probably smells really bad down there. Here, he has a proper encounter with a human being, potentially his first for all we know. And he's mocked. It's like a reminder that it's never going to change for him. When he returns to the sewer, Splinter gives him a pep talk and reminds him that his anger clouds his judgment. That sounds familiar. He makes particular reference to how Raphael is unique from his brothers and how he chooses to fight his demons alone. During this whole exchange, Raph is despondent. You can really see his inner turmoil thanks to the unfathomably wonderful work by Jim Henson and company. He's practically in tears. He knows his faults, but despite himself, he just can't get over them. I feel like in other interpretations, this would have been the point where Raphael would snap back at Splinter and storm off, allowing him to stick to a basic trope. He's a mad dude. But here, he doesn't say a word. It shows a layer of depth to the character, that he's just absolutely riddled with issues that even he doesn't like. Soon afterwards, April is encountered by contingent of the foot in the subway, and Raphael single-handedly fends them off. It's important to note that the progression of the character isn't linear, and in this instance, we see that his aggression can be a blessing, as well as a curse. He doesn't bother with ninjutsu here, he just throws himself into the fray and lets his physicality do the talking. Would a more stealthy approach have been wiser? Sure, but he acted on impulse, and he looked like a badass doing so. He takes April back to their lair, and once again, his rash decision-making is a double-edged sword. The Foot Clan have followed him there, suggesting that he got out-ninja'd by a bunch of kids in a street gang. God damn it, Raphael! So a little bit of a tangent, you could take his rescue and subsequent abduction of April O'Neil in a few ways. The most basic interpretation is probably the correct one. He was just trying to get his Sai back, and when the Foot Clan got involved, he couldn't just leave her there. Cut and dry. But let's be silly and read between the lines a little here. Why bring her there? Why couldn't he have just taken her back to the surface, dropped her off somewhere safe, and not risked getting followed back home? Is it just short-sightedness? Or did he see in April someone he could trust, someone he could interact with? Is he so desperate for human connection that he basically smuggled himself a new friend? It's a reach, I know. And the actual reason for it comes down to simple plot progression, so we'll move on. The Turtles escort April back to her apartment, and Raphael continues to isolate himself while the others are joking around and having fun. He's really not one for small talk, and indeed, the only point he's shown levity in this movie up to this point was when he was trading barbs with Casey Jones. He's out of his comfort zone here. Even when the boys are all laughing at April's joke, there's something unnatural about Raph's reaction. It's like he's just chuckling because it's the expected response and he can't properly engage. It's just like, hey, everyone else is laughing, I guess I'll laugh too. Then there's this pause when he exits, and he has this really troubled expression on his face. Is he trying to think of something to say, or is he just that sad to leave April? Again, I'm reading much more into this than I should, but there's just so many mounting little details in this character that make him feel nuanced and authentic. When the boys return to the sewer, the place has been trashed, and Splinter is missing. Raphael loses his shit right here, because he's lost the only person in the world who actually understood him. But it's more than that. In Tmnt issue 44, when Donatello is found badly wounded, we can see all of the reactions of the Turtles and their allies. Now check out Raph here. He's livid, he's fighting back tears. But when Raphael finds out that something has happened to Splinter, he bellows in agony, like he just stepped on a Lego. In part, maybe because he feels like this is his fault. He's the one who brought April and led the Foot Clan back to their home, and in a rare moment of peace, he wasn't there to protect his master. Basically, Raphael's just tormented in the first half of this movie, frequently. I actually forgot how much more he was featured than his brothers, and clearly he's the most interesting story to tell. He's relatable, he's vulnerable, he's flawed. He wants to keep his emotions in check, but circumstances force him back into a rage time and time again. The Turtles shack up with April, eating all of her pizza and crashing at her pad in one night like Bill Clinton in the 70s, and she appears on television, discussing the rise of the Foot. She takes the opportunity to thank Raphael, and look at his face, man. That elation, as if he's never heard a compliment in all his life. And in fairness, outside of his family, he wouldn't have. April represents his very first friend, and suddenly he doesn't feel so alone. It's all part of his path to redemption. Bit by bit, he's growing up emotionally. But it doesn't happen all at once. Anxious about having to wait around for a lead, he blows up and he storms off. He goes up to the roof and he blows off some steam in broad daylight, and unfortunately, the Foot Clan get the drop on him once again. Yeah, they really make out the Foot to be these masters of stealth, capable of sneaking up on a guy who's been training in the art his whole life. But hey, at least makes for a cool fight scene. Raphael takes them all on by himself, and again, this is the only time so far where we see him pulling out one-liners.
You guys must be studying the abridged book of ninja fighting.
The dude is doing what he does best, and even with the odds against him, he remains confident. It's a stark contrast to the awkward interactions before. It's like, here, he feels like himself. Funnily enough, it doesn't go so great. Raph comes crashing through the skylight, and the rest of the turtles have to pick up the slack. The sound effect Donatello makes when he spits water at the Foot is absolutely hilarious, and the guy sells it like he's been hit with acid. After this, Raph is out of commission for a little bit, and we get some nice moments, especially with Leonardo, who really hadn't had too much of a chance to shine in this movie. We go through a short montage where April talks about Donatello, Casey Jones, Leonardo, basically everyone except for Michelangelo.
Yeah, how come you didn't use me in the montage? I thought my story was pretty interesting.
Once Raphael awakens, he's like a new man with a newfound appreciation for his brothers. It's quite the jarring 180, and from here he really takes a backseat in airtime. Effectively, his character arc is complete, and more of the focus goes on the clashing personalities of April and Casey, as well as, some Splinter stuff and the Turtles as a collective group. There really isn't much more to say here. This more mellow version of Raphael really loses his edge, and we're entering the final stages of the film by now. A little interesting thing to note is that when Shredder claims that Splinter is dead, it's actually Leonardo who loses his cool and rushes him. Raphael is the first one to throw his weapons aside to save his brother's life. Hey, just a neat little detail. Splinter arrives, puts in some work, and Casey Jones commits murder. It's all good, clean family fun. Also, I never noticed that Raph says bitchin' in this last scene.
Bitchin'!
Like, he said damn a few times, but bitchin'? He finally joins in the catchphrase game, only to swear at us. So there you have it. My incredibly overblown and largely pointless analysis on Raphael in the 1990 Ninja Turtles movie. By and large, his story is told in the first half of the movie. And as he falls into line, the Turtles become a complete fighting unit, though it's arguably at the expense of the most interesting character. To summate, the reason why this version of Raphael is my favorite is because of the many nuances and wrinkles he has in his character. He's not just a hothead, he's a relatable, troubled warrior who seems desperate to find some kind of validation. By the movie's end, he finds it in his family, the one thing that he had there with him all along. Forest from the trees, or some sort of analogy like that. But what do you think? Does this Raph resonate with you? Or do you prefer one of his alternate takes from another medium? Let me know in the comments! And hey, if you enjoyed this video, throw me a like so I know if it's worth doing more of. I mean, it's completely off-brand for me, and yeah, it's weird. But I liked it. Thanks, guys, and cowabunga. God, that didn't land at all.